All right, so let's talk about something you probably see every single day and don't think twice about: a sugar cube. Seems simple, right? Well, today we're going to unpack the wild, complex, and frankly pretty brutal history packed inside of it. We're diving into the amazing work of anthropologist Sidney Mintz to understand how this little bit of sweetness literally shaped the modern world.
So Mintz's whole investigation really kicks off with this one central question. It's not just that we like sugar, but why do some cultures consume it in such massive quantities? Is that just, natural? Or is there something more going on here? And this is where we get Mintz's first brilliant insight. He says, look, we have to pull two things apart: biology and history. Sure, biologically, the ability to taste sweetness is a universal human thing. But our habit, our cultural need for huge regular supplies of it, that's not biology. That is a product of some very specific historical forces.
Okay, so let's actually trace that history. We're about to see how sugar went on this absolutely dramatic journey, transforming from one of the rarest luxuries on Earth into something that for many of us is a daily necessity.
What's really incredible about this timeline is just the sheer speed of this change. For over 500 years, sugar was this exotic spice, as precious as saffron. Then, it became a major status symbol for the rich. But right around 1650, everything changes, and it begins its march into every single household.
And to really get a handle on just how elite sugar was, check out its early uses. It was prescribed as a medicine, it was used to preserve food, and get this, it was even a form of art. Aristocrats would show off their wealth by having these massive sugar sculptures at their feasts. Funnily enough, the least common use for it was as a simple sweetener. It was way too valuable for that.
But here's the thing. For sugar to become cheap and common, it had to be produced on an absolutely unimaginable scale. And this is where the story pivots from the sweetness at the European dinner table to the brutal power of colonial production.
This quote from Mintz is the absolute key. Before there were factories in the Industrial Revolution, there was the sugar plantation. This was not simple farming. It was a highly organized, synchronized, and brutal system. It was really a forerunner to the modern factory. And let's be crystal clear about what this system was. It was an agricultural factory that demanded incredible discipline. The sugarcane had to be harvested and processed immediately, which required round-the-clock, synchronized labor. This brutal discipline was perfected in the killing fields of the Caribbean, and it was built entirely on the backs of enslaved people. And the human cost was just staggering. More than half of all enslaved Africans forced across the Atlantic were sent to sugar plantations. The work was so deadly that the population of enslaved people was often not self-sustaining. It was a system that literally consumed human lives just to produce sweetness.
So, how do these two stories connect? How does the horror of the plantation in the colonies link up with the rise of mass consumption in cities like London and Manchester?
Well, this is the crucial point. Mintz argues these aren't two separate histories at all, but two sides of the same capitalist coin. The wealth generated by enslaved labor in the colonies was used to fuel the Industrial Revolution back in Europe, and the sugar produced by that very same labor, it literally fueled the new industrial working class.
Now, this is a mind-blowing concept. Mintz called the colonization of time. Factory work demanded a totally new, rigid discipline to the clock. Workers didn't have time for traditional, slow-cooked meals anymore. So what could give them a quick, cheap, high-energy hit? Sugary tea and jam on bread. Sugar became the perfect fuel to adapt human bodies to the relentless pace of the factory.
This leads to a final, pretty profound question. If sugar was produced through so much violence, how did people come to see it as a simple, innocent comfort? How did its brutal origins become so invisible?
Mintz explains this with two key ideas. First, intensification. The elites made sugar desirable by adding it to their existing fancy rituals, like drinking tea. Then came extensification. As sugar got cheaper, the working class adopted it not for luxury, but for new daily survival routines. It became a necessity. And this is the powerful conclusion. Through this process, as sugar became a mundane part of daily life, a simple comfort, a source of cheap energy, its cultural meaning was washed clean. Its sweetness became an ideological mask, hiding the horrific brutality and power dynamics required to produce it.
So we're left with this question. Mintz's work shows us that the most ordinary items on our kitchen shelves can contain these extraordinary histories of power, struggle, and connection. And it really makes you ask,
What other invisible histories are we consuming every single day?